Years ago, on the far edge of known space, a human explorer found themselves in a situation that seemed hopeless. They had been part of a small crew sent to study a planet thought to hold unusual resources, but a sudden storm of charged particles ripped through the atmosphere. The ship shook violently, alarms blaring, and within minutes, systems started to fail. The crew tried everything they could, but in the chaos, the human became separated from the others. Alone, with limited supplies and no way to communicate with the home base, survival seemed almost impossible. The planet was harsh and unforgiving. Its landscape was jagged, with black rock formations rising like broken teeth from the ground. Strange winds swept across the barren valleys, and the air carried a bitter metallic scent that made it hard to breathe. Every step felt uncertain, because the ground itself seemed alive with hidden dangers, crevices that could swallow a person whole, and sudden shifts in terrain that could break bones in an instant. The human realized quickly that they could not rely on equipment alone. Their mind and instincts would have to guide them. Days passed, and hunger and exhaustion began to take their toll. The explorer rationed what little food and water remained, but even with careful management, weakness crept in. At night, when temperatures dropped sharply, the cold gnawed at their body, and the darkness made every sound and shadow feel threatening. They began to question whether anyone would ever find them, whether help even existed in this distant, forgotten corner of space. Then, when hope was at its lowest, it arrived. It wasn't loud or obvious at first. The human noticed a faint light in the distance, moving with purpose. As it drew closer, it became clear that the light was not from a natural source. It was organized, precise, almost intelligent. A group of beings emerged, not human, not like anything the explorer had seen before. They moved with calm confidence, their forms shining faintly against the dark sky. They spoke in a language the human could not understand, yet the intent behind their actions was unmistakable. These beings meant help. The first moments were tense. The human had learned to trust little in this place, and instinctively kept distance. But the beings did not attack. Instead, they extended what could only be called hands or tools toward the human, offering warmth and nourishment. They provided water from a source that seemed self-contained and food that felt unfamiliar yet sustaining. Slowly, the human accepted the aid, marveling at the creature's gentleness and the way they seemed to anticipate needs without words. Over the next few days, the beings guided the human to safety. They led through rocky passes and sheltered valleys, always alert to the dangers around them. The explorer noticed that the beings had a way of understanding the environment that humans could not. They seemed aware of hidden traps and shifting terrain, moving as if the land itself spoke to them. In their presence, the human felt both humbled and inspired. They began to learn small lessons about survival and observation, absorbing knowledge that no training on Earth could ever teach. During this time, the human began to ask questions, not in words, because the beings did not seem to speak in a way humans could understand, but through gestures and small experiments. They tried to communicate curiosity, gratitude, even fear. The beings responded patiently, guiding without judgment. It was clear that the human was not just a subject to observe. They were someone the beings had chosen to help, to protect. And in that simple act of aid, a bond began to form, a bond that would carry weight far beyond this planet. And these few days, it was not a long stay. After a week, the human had regained strength and a semblance of confidence. The beings guided them to a hidden path that would eventually lead back to the human's crew. Before parting, the human tried to convey thanks, offering gestures, and even some of the rations they carried. The beings accepted in their own way, almost as if acknowledging that the act of giving and receiving had meaning beyond survival. Then, just as quietly as they had arrived, the beings disappeared into the strange, rugged horizon, leaving the human alone once more, but no longer hopeless. Returning to the wreckage of the ship, the human used the knowledge gained from those days to locate and rescue the rest of the crew. Repairs were made, and with careful navigation, they managed to leave the planet. But the memory of the beings stayed. Even after months and years of missions back on Earth and beyond, the image of their calm, glowing forms, the feeling of their steady guidance, and the memory of the life they had saved remained vivid. The humans shared the story cautiously. At first, few believed it. After all, reports of alien encounters were often met with skepticism, ridicule, or disbelief. Yet, to those who had known the explorer well, there was no doubt in their sincerity. They spoke of the beings not as monsters or gods, but as compassionate helpers who had acted selflessly, bridging a gap that seemed unbridgeable. Slowly, the story spread among a select group of humans explorers, captains, and crew members who dared to venture far into the unknown. The tale became part of whispered conversations on long voyages, a quiet reminder that even in the darkest corners of space, help could arrive from unexpected places. It wasn't about rewards or recognition. It was about trust, about the simple fact that acts of kindness could ripple across worlds. Years later, as the human looked out at the stars from the bridge of a new ship, they remembered that first encounter. They thought about the beings who had saved them when survival seemed impossible. And in that reflection, they realized that what had happened was more than a rescue. It was a lesson. A lesson in humility, in hope, and in the power of connection that stretched beyond species, beyond worlds, and perhaps even beyond time. The memory became a guiding light, a silent code for the human and the few others who had heard the story. It shaped decisions, influenced actions, and reminded them always to act with courage and compassion. No one could predict when a similar act of aid might be needed, or when a moment of trust and bravery could echo across spacedot. And so, the first part of this story ends with a human changed forever. Alone on a harsh, unforgiving world, they had experienced what few humans ever would, an encounter with beings who acted purely to help another being survive. That encounter would not remain a memory only for them. It would become a seed, quietly planting itself in the hearts of many who would one day answer a call, just as they had been answered. After returning to Earth, the human explorer tried to settle back into a life that now felt too ordinary. Everything seemed smaller, quieter, and less significant than the vast, dangerous world they had just left behind. Friends and colleagues welcomed them home, congratulated them on surviving, and praised their courage. Yet no words, no celebration, could capture the magnitude of what had happened. The memory of the beings who had saved them lingered in every thought, every decision. Like a quiet pulse that refused to fade out at first, the explorer hesitated to share the full story. How could anyone truly believe them? The beings were unlike anything humanity had ever encountered. They had no identifiable form, no recognizable language, and their abilities seemed almost otherworldly. To describe them in detail could invite ridicule, skepticism, or worse, disbelief. Still, the explorer felt a responsibility, a need to pass on the lessons learned and the experience of being saved when hope seemed lost. So, carefully, they began to recount the events to a select circle. These were not casual listeners, but people who understood the risks of space travel, who had faced danger themselves, and who knew that extraordinary events could happen in the vast unknown. The explorer spoke of the planet, the storm, the separation from the crew, and most importantly, of the beings whose actions had turned the tide between life and death. The reaction was a mix of awe and curiosity. Some listeners were fascinated, wanting every detail of the rescue in the strange, glowing forms that seemed to move with an intelligence beyond comprehension. Others were more cautious, wondering if the story was metaphorical, a dream, or a product of the human mind under extreme stress. But no one could deny the impact it had on the explorer, and that sincerity could not be faked. Among the listeners were a number of Terran captains, the leaders of exploration, missions, and interstellar crews. They understood the value of trust, of preparation, and of knowledge gained through experience. To them, the story was more than a tale of survival. It was a lesson in vigilance, humility, and the unpredictable nature of the universe. It showed that even humans, with all their technology and training, might find themselves outmatched by the unknown. And yet, it also showed that aid could come from places humans could not predict or understand. These captains began to discuss what the explorer had experienced. They spoke of the beings not as mythical creatures, but as examples of the unknown helping the known. The conversations grew deeper over time. How could humanity learn from this encounter? Could they recognize when help might come, or when it might be needed? What obligations did humans have toward those who acted selflessly, even if they were entirely different from them? These questions lingered in the minds of those who heard the story, and slowly they began to shape a culture of vigilance, preparation, and mutual support among the Terran fleet. Meanwhile, the explorer could not forget the planet, the storm, or the beings who had saved them. At night, they would often lie awake, thinking of the glowing forms moving calmly through the jagged terrain, guiding them to safety. Every decision they made afterward seemed to carry the weight of that memory. In meetings, during training exercises, and even in personal moments of doubt, the lesson remained clear. Help could arrive in ways unimaginable, and one should always be ready to respond when the time came. Over the years, the story spread quietly, carried not by news outlets or official channels, but by whispers among crews and captains who had ventured far from Earth, on long voyages. As ships traveled past unexplored systems and dangerous cosmic phenomena, the tale was told again and again. It was no longer just the story of one human who had survived a storm. It became a symbol of. After the rescue and the return to their home planet, the human could not stop thinking about what had happened. That one act of help on the distant, hostile world had changed something deep inside. The human began sharing the story carefully, first with close colleagues and fellow explorers who had faced similar dangers. At first, many listened politely, unsure what to make of it. Space exploration was full of risks, accidents, and unexpected events, so a tale of mysterious glowing beings might have seemed too fantastical. Yet there was something in the human's voice, something sincere, steady, and unshakable that made listeners pause. Slowly, the story began to spread. It did not explode into public knowledge right away. Instead, it moved quietly, almost like a whispered secret among explorers, pilots, and captains who ventured into the unknown. These were people who had experienced the loneliness of space, the silence of stars, and the uncertainty of survival. To them, the story held weight. It was not about miracles or fantasy. It was about compassion, trust, and the power of a single act to change lives. The human noticed something, curious as they recounted their experience. Listeners did not just hear the words, they remembered them. The story became a part of informal training among crews preparing for long journeys. Commanders would tell it as an example of hope and perseverance. It was a reminder that in space, help might come from where one least expects it, and that small acts of courage could have consequences far beyond the immediate moment. The story encouraged a subtle shift in the culture of space explorers. They began to value not just skill and knowledge, but empathy, observation, and patience. Over the years, the human continued to explore, visiting worlds that were as dangerous and unpredictable as the first one where they had been stranded. Each mission carried risks, and each mission reinforced the lessons learned from that life-saving encounter. The human trained younger explorers, sharing the story not as a myth, but as a real example of interstellar cooperation and understanding. It became a story of preparation, how to survive, how to notice subtle signs in the environment, and how to remain calm even when danger seemed overwhelming. Meanwhile, the memory of the beings never faded. In quiet moments on long voyages, the human would recall the light that had guided them, the hands or tools that had offered aid, and the calm presence that had reassured them in moments of panic. That memory became a compass of sorts, guiding decisions and actions. Even when new challenges arose, equipment failures, unexpected storms, or hostile terrains, the human relied on that inner memory to remain steady, to make choices that were cautious yet confident. Other captains and explorers also began to take note. They listened with curiosity and respect as the story was shared. Some even reported noticing similar phenomena on distant planets, signs of strange but helpful activity, subtle guidance, or unexpected aid at critical moments. While these events were never fully understood, they were documented and studied. The idea grew that there might be intelligent beings in the universe who were willing to assist humanity in certain circumstances, and that acts of trust and goodwill might create a bond that transcended language, species, and distance. As time went on, humanity itself advanced. Ships became faster, more reliable, and better equipped to handle the unknown. Communication across long distances improved. Crews became more skilled, and the culture of space exploration matured. Yet, despite all the technological progress, the human knew that technology alone was never enough. It was experience, observation, empathy, and courage that mattered most in the moments when life hung in the balance. The story of the beings who had once helped them became a symbol of that truth. Knowledge alone could not save a life. Understanding, trust, and readiness could. The human noticed that sharing the story changed not just the listeners, but themselves as well. Each retelling strengthened their resolve to act with compassion and integrity. The memory of being helped in a seemingly hopeless situation reinforced the importance of paying attention to others, of stepping in when aid was needed, even when it required risk or sacrifice. It was a lesson that transcended space exploration. It applied to life itself. The human became a quiet advocate for preparation, for empathy, and for recognizing the value of unexpected help. One day, during a briefing with a fleet of Terran captains preparing for a distant mission, the humans shared the story once more. As they spoke, something remarkable happened. The room, usually filled with chatter and debate about strategy, fell silent. Every captain, from the most experienced to the newest recruit, listened intently. There was no doubt that they understood the lesson. Acts of kindness and courage, no matter how small, could ripple across time and space. The story had become more than a memory. It was a guide, a principle, a quiet bond connecting those who dared to explore the stars. Over the following years, this shared understanding influenced missions across human space exploration. Captains made decisions not just based on calculations or protocol, but also on empathy, awareness, and readiness to assist. When crews faced emergencies, they remembered the story of the human who had been saved years ago. They knew that one act of aid could echo far beyond the immediate moment, and they became more willing to take risks to help others, trusting that goodwill could be returned, even across worlds. Meanwhile, the human never forgot the feelings from that first encounter, the fear, the uncertainty, and the relief that came when help arrived. They realized that those emotions were a bridge connecting them to others, both humans and beings from other worlds. They shared the story not just as a tale of survival, but as a lesson in connection. Humanity could not predict the universe, but it could prepare itself to act with courage, patience, and understanding. That preparedness became a legacy, carried forward by explorers, captains, and crews who valued both skill and heart. The story also served as a quiet inspiration for those who would one day face impossible situations. It reminded them that survival was often as much about mindset as about technology. The humans' calm in the presence of danger, their trust in unseen helpers, and their ability to learn quickly from experience became guiding principles for others. In essence, the story had created a culture of readiness, empathy, and courage that spread through the fleet quietly but powerfully. In reflection, the human understood that the beings who had once helped them did not just save a life, they planted a seed. That seed grew into trust, courage, and a subtle understanding among humans that the universe was full of unknown possibilities, some dangerous, some kind, and that humanity's role was to respond wisely, courageously, and with compassion. The memory of that first act of aid became a quiet force shaping countless missions, decisions, and interactions across the stars. Years later, as the human looked out over the expanse of space from the bridge of their ship, they felt a sense of continuity. The beings who had once helped them were far away, and perhaps their motives were unknowable, but the connection endured. It existed in the decisions of explorers who chose to help, in the care with which captains guided their crews, and in the silent understanding that even a single act of kindness could ripple across time and space. And so, this part of the story closes with a truth that would remain with humanity forever. Experiences, especially those involving help and trust, do not fade with time. They shape decisions, inspire courage, and create bonds that endure even across galaxies. The human understood that they had been part of something bigger than survival. They had been part of the beginning of a network of trust, one that would one day answer a call far beyond what they could imagine. Years had passed since that first unforgettable encounter. Humanity had grown, its presence in the galaxy spreading across star systems, and its explorers had faced countless dangers. Yet, the memory of the beings who had once helped a lone human in a desperate moment never faded. For that human, the one who had survived against the odds, the memory remained as sharp as if it had happened yesterday. It was a quiet, steady reminder of trust, courage, and the unseen threads that connected beings across space. Then, one ordinary day aboard a routine exploratory mission, everything changed. The human, now a seasoned captain of a fleet vessel, was reviewing mission logs when an unusual signal appeared on the long-range sensors. It was faint at first, barely distinguishable from background cosmic noise, but it carried a pattern deliberate, intelligent, and urgent. The signal was unlike anything recorded before. The human stared at the screen, heart quickening, intuition screaming that this was not just another technical anomaly. Carefully, the human decoded the signal. Every pulse and variation seemed to contain intent, a message directed specifically to humanity. And then it became unmistakable. The call was coming from the same beings who had once extended their help. The beings were in trouble. The signal did not contain threats or demands. It contained a simple, urgent request for aid. It was a call that transcended language and culture, one that reached directly into the human heart, reminding them of the debt owed long ago, not in obligation, but in trust and shared understanding. The human knew immediately what had to be done. They activated communication protocols and attempted to relay the signal to other Terran captains across different sectors. The response was immediate, but not in words. It was a shared understanding. Among humans who had heard the original story, a quiet recognition passed through the ranks. The moment they had trained for, the moment they had unknowingly prepared for, had arrived. This was the time to act. As news of the call spread, fleets across multiple systems began mobilizing. Captains remembered the story not as myth, but as a guiding principle. When a call for help arrives, it must be answered. Humans had grown capable, brave, and organized, but the core lesson remained the same. Technology alone could not save those in need. preparedness, courage, and a willingness to respond, even against uncertainty, were what truly mattered. And now, humanity faced the ultimate test of that understanding. The journey to the being's location was not easy. The coordinates led through uncharted regions of space, where gravitational anomalies and cosmic storms were frequent. Ships shuddered under unexpected pressures, sensors flickered with interference, and crews worked tirelessly to maintain stability. Every step reminded them of their vulnerability and the importance of unity. Yet, unlike previous missions, there was a renewed sense of purpose. Each captain and crew member felt a personal connection to the beings who had once helped a single human. Their resolve strengthened with every mile, every hazard, every decision made under pressure. The signal guided them, almost like a beacon. It was not loud or commanding. It was subtle, precise, and urgent. It seemed to contain a rhythm, a pulse that resonated with the human understanding of navigation and urgency. Crews learned to interpret it intuitively, adjusting their courses and speeds accordingly. Even the youngest navigators, who had only heard the original story secondhand, felt a sense of responsibility. They knew that this was not just another mission. It was an echo of the past, a moment where humanity's values and courage would be measured. During the journey, the human captain reflected on the lessons of the original encounter. Survival had depended on observation, calm thinking, and trust in help that seemed improbable. Now, those lessons applied on a much larger scale. The fleets were organized, equipped, and skilled, but they would face unforeseen challenges that no manual could predict. The memory of those beings, their calm presence and intuitive aid, became the guiding principle for decision-making. Humanity was not alone in the universe, and the bonds formed through trust and compassion were powerful tools that could not be replicated by technology alone. As they drew closer to the source of the call, the scale of the situation became clear. Sensors picked up massive distortions in the surrounding space, indicating that the beings were in the midst of a critical crisis. Their environment, once stable, had become unstable due to forces unknown to humanity. Ships navigated carefully through the turbulence, relying on both instruments and intuition. Every decision mattered. Every misstep could lead to disaster, and yet the human crews moved with precision and purpose. They were guided not just by strategy, but by a deep sense of connection and urgency. The human captain realized that this mission would define not just their career, but the very spirit of human exploration. It was proof that acts of kindness, no matter how distant in time, create bonds that endure. The beings had once helped a single human in need, and now humanity had the chance to return that aid on a scale never imagined. The moment was profound, almost spiritual, as the human understood the immense responsibility and the power of collective action. Hours turned into days as the fleets approached the being's location. Communication remained constant, with every ship relaying sensor data, environmental analysis, and potential hazards. The human felt a quiet pride in how crews collaborated seamlessly, despite the vast distances and challenges. There was no room for ego or hesitation, only the shared goal of reaching those in need. The memory of the first rescue, the lessons of survival, and the stories passed through generations now converged into a single, urgent mission: to answer the call. Finally, the first glimpse of the being's habitat appeared on long-range scanners. Their structures, once subtle and almost invisible, were now clearly stressed and damaged. Energy fluctuations indicated that life support systems were failing, and that immediate aid was essential. The fleets adjusted their formation, carefully coordinating approaches to avoid further harm, while positioning themselves to provide maximum support. Every crew member understood the stakes, and a quiet determination settled over every ship. This was the culmination of years of preparation, courage, and trust. The human captain transmitted a signal to the beings, attempting to communicate readiness to help. There was no response in words, but the intensity of the original signal seemed to ease slightly, as if the beings understood that aid was arriving. It was a moment of silent understanding, a connection that transcended species and language. Humanity had learned, through experience and memory, how to act when the universe called for courage. The fleets moved into position, deploying support systems, shields, and emergency modules. The human reflected on how far they had come, from a lone survivor on a hostile planet to the leader of a coordinated response spanning multiple star systems. Every lesson learned, every story shared, every act of kindness had prepared humanity for this moment. It was not technology alone that mattered, but the bonds, experience, and understanding that had been cultivated over years. And yet, even in this moment of clarity, the human knew the mission was only beginning. The crisis was real, the danger immediate, and the challenges ahead unpredictable. But there was no fear. Humanity had answered the call, and the echoes of that first rescue, the life saved, the compassion shown resonated now across fleets, systems, and hearts. It was proof that a single act of aid could ripple outward in ways no one could foresee, shaping destiny and forging connections that spanned the star's dot in the quiet moments before the first ships reached the beings. The human captain looked out at the dark expanse of space, feeling the weight of history, responsibility, and hope. The call had arrived, and humanity had responded. What began as a solitary act of mercy on a distant planet had now evolved into something far greater, a demonstration of courage, unity, and the enduring power of trust. And so, Part 4 closes with humanity poised at the threshold of action, ready to fulfill a debt not of obligation, but of shared understanding and compassion. The fleets were moving, the beings were waiting, and the echoes of the past had brought them together in a moment that would define the future. The story of that first rescue, long preserved in memory and story, had now become the guiding force for one of humanity's most important missions yet. The signal had been received, decoded, and understood. Now it was time for action. Across multiple star systems, Terran captains were alerted. They did not hesitate. Every ship capable of travel, every crew trained for emergencies, prepared to launch immediately. This was no ordinary mission. This was a moment where humanity's collective courage, skill, and compassion would be tested on a scale never before attempted. Every captain who had heard the story of that first rescue understood the stakes, and every one of them felt a personal responsibility to answer the call. Orders were simple, but the execution was complex. Fleets from distant systems began moving toward the coordinates of the beings in need. Some ships were small and agile, designed for fast reconnaissance. Others were massive, carrying supplies, emergency modules, and advanced technology for environmental stabilization. The sheer number of ships created a spectacle in space, like a flowing river of lights converging toward a single point. Each crew member understood that every step mattered. A miscalculation could put not just one ship, but the entire operation at risk. As the fleets traveled, communication networks buzzed with updates. Captains coordinated their paths, shared sensor readings, and warned each other of unexpected anomalies. The mission required absolute precision, but also trust. Each captain had to rely on the decisions of others, believing that every human in the network was acting with the same sense of urgency and purpose. There was no time for hesitation, no room for doubt. The story of the original rescue, the memory of a single human saved by unexpected help, had prepared them for this exact moment, teaching that courage and trust could bridge even the most daunting challenges. The human captain who had first encountered the beings played a central role in this coordination. They guided smaller fleets through uncharted sectors, advising on navigation through gravitational anomalies, asteroid belts, and cosmic storms. Every choice was informed by experience, intuition, and a deep understanding of the being's possible environment. But the captain also relied on others, listening to reports from younger captains, learning from their observations, and adapting strategies in real time. This mission was not about a single leader, it was about collective effort, where every individual mattered and every contribution counted as the fleets approached the target zone. The magnitude of the being's crisis became clear. Their habitat was unstable, surrounded by energy fluctuations, debris fields, and areas of gravitational distortion. Sensors indicated failing life support systems and structural damage that could worsen at any moment. The situation demanded both speed and precision. Captains communicated continuously, assigning tasks to different ships. Some focused on clearing debris, others on stabilizing energy fields, and yet others on deploying supplies and medical support. Every action had to be synchronized perfectly. Despite the danger, morale remained high. Crews understood the importance of the mission, not just as a technical challenge, but as an opportunity to honor a bond forged long ago. The human captain recalled the first act of aid they had received on that hostile world, remembering the calm, steady presence of the beings who had saved them. That memory inspired every decision, every maneuver, and every act of courage. It reminded everyone that this was not a mission driven solely by obligation. It was a mission guided by trust, compassion, and a shared understanding that helping others creates bonds that endure. The first contact with the being's habitat was tense. Energy readings were erratic, and structural instability made approach dangerous. Smaller ships moved first, carefully surveying the environment and transmitting real-time data back to the main fleet. The human captain guided these efforts, drawing on lessons learned from years of exploration and survival. Each decision was critical. One wrong move could collapse part of the habitat, endangering the very lives they had come to protect. Yet, despite the danger, something extraordinary happened. The fleets began to move with a precision and unity that surpassed expectations. Captains anticipated each other's needs and adjusted courses without hesitation. Communication flowed seamlessly, and every crew member understood the purpose behind each action. The story of the first rescue had become more than a memory. It had become a principle, guiding behavior and decisions in ways that technology alone could not achieve. Trust, courage, and empathy drove the operation as much as engines and sensors. Supplies were delivered, stabilizers deployed, and emergency modules activated. Teams worked tirelessly to repair critical systems, shore up weak structures, and prevent further damage. In the midst of chaos, small acts of heroism appeared. A navigator risking a small shuttle to deliver critical supplies to a damaged area. An engineer improvising a repair that prevented structural collapse. A medic calming a panicked crew member while tending to the injured. Each act was a reflection of the human spirit, the same spirit that had been recognized and aided by the beings years ago. Hours passed, and progress became visible. Life support systems stabilized, structural integrity improved, and the beings themselves began to respond. They did not communicate in words, but their movements, energy pulses, and subtle signals indicated relief and understanding. The human captain watched carefully, guiding the fleets while absorbing the enormity of what was happening. This was more than a rescue. It was a moment of connection, proof that the lessons of the past could shape actions in the present. Throughout the operation, captains and crews experienced moments of quiet reflection. They remembered the stories they had been told, the lessons of survival, and the importance of empathy and courage. The story of one human saved on a distant planet had grown into a shared philosophy, influencing decisions, inspiring bravery, and fostering trust across fleets. Now, in this critical moment, that philosophy was being tested and affirmed. The success of the mission depended not just on technology, but on the human capacity to act with purpose, coordination, and compassion. The final phase of the operation involved consolidating the fleets and ensuring that the beings' habitat could sustain them long term. Larger ships delivered supplies and energy stabilizers, while smaller ships continued fine adjustments to environmental systems. Teams worked in harmony, aware that each action had far-reaching consequences. There was a sense of quiet celebration amid the tension or recognition that humanity was living up to the ideals inspired by a single act of aid many years ago, by the time the operation was complete. The situation had transformed. The being's habitat was stable, energy systems functioning, and life support fully operational. The crisis had been averted, and the fleets now prepared for the return journey. Throughout the operation, every captain, crew member, and leader understood the significance of what had been achieved. It was not merely a technical success. It was a demonstration of unity, trust, and the enduring impact of kindness. As the fleets prepared to depart, the human captain reflected on the journey. From a lone survivor on a hostile world to the leader of an interstellar rescue operation, the experience had come full circle. The beings who had once aided a single human had unknowingly inspired a culture of courage, empathy, and readiness that now extended across systems. The mission was a testament to the idea that no act of kindness is ever wasted. That trust and compassion can ripple across time and space, shaping the future in ways that are often invisible until the moment they are needed. And so, Part 5 closes with the fleets returning, the being safe, and humanity proven capable of extraordinary unity and courage. The story of the first rescue had grown, evolved, and guided action on a scale never imagined. The bonds formed through trust and compassion had been tested, affirmed, and strengthened. Humanity had answered the call, not for reward or recognition, but because it was the right thing to do, and in doing so, had created a legacy that would endure across the stars. With the mission complete and the being safe, the human captain and the fleets began the long journey back to their respective systems. The air aboard every ship was filled with a quiet, reflective energy. Crews were exhausted from hours of intense coordination, careful maneuvering, and constant decision-making, yet there was a deep sense of satisfaction. They had accomplished something extraordinary, something far greater than any routine exploration or scientific achievement. They had acted together to help another sentient life. Guided by lessons learned years ago from a single act of kindness, the human captain, looking out over the stars from the bridge, could not help but think back to that first encounter on the hostile planet. At the time, survival had seemed impossible. Now, humanity had responded not just to a single life, but to an entire civilization in need. The contrast was staggering, and yet it felt like a natural progression. The first rescue had planted a seed of understanding, trust, and empathy that had grown quietly over the years, spreading through fleets, missions, and stories. That seed had become a tree, and now its branches had reached across light years to touch lives once again. The beings, though mysterious in their form and expression, seemed to convey appreciation in subtle ways. Their energy pulses, movement patterns, and signals suggested relief, trust, and recognition. The human captain could feel the bond, the same bond that had saved their life so many years before, resonating across the distance. It was not just a matter of repayment. It was a mutual understanding, a connection formed across species, time, and experience. The beings had acted without expectation then, and humanity had acted without hesitation now. In that symmetry lay something profound. The universe had shown that kindness and courage are powerful forces that transcend words. As fleets began to separate, returning to their systems and posts, conversations and reflections took place aboard every ship. Crews spoke of bravery, teamwork, and the quiet moments of trust that had made the mission possible. They spoke of the small decisions that had mattered, of adjustments made in moments of uncertainty, and of the instinct to act with both courage and care. For many, it was a life-changing experience. They realized that exploration was not only about discovering new worlds or achieving technical success, but about understanding the meaning of action, responsibility, and the ripple effect of decisions made in critical moments. The human captain spent hours in private reflection. They remembered the fear and vulnerability felt years ago, the overwhelming relief when help arrived, and the lessons learned in survival, observation, and trust. That memory had guided every decision on this mission, and it had reminded them why humanity's values mattered as much as its technology. They felt a deep humility, recognizing that no matter how advanced or prepared humans became, success often depended on something more subtle: empathy, courage, and the willingness to step into the unknown to help another. Back on the fleets, younger captains and crew members shared their experiences with those who had not participated directly. They recounted the moments when coordination, careful observation, and bold action had saved lives. They spoke of the energy readings, environmental adjustments, and subtle cues that guided their decisions. The story of the original rescue was told and retold, not as legend, but as living guidance. It had become a teaching tool, a principle, and a source of inspiration. Humans who had never faced the initial danger could understand its significance through these stories. Among the beings themselves, subtle changes were noticed as well. Their systems stabilized, their movements became more fluid, and their interactions suggested a calm confidence returning. They had survived the crisis, in large part due to humanity's timely intervention. Though communication was not direct, the mutual understanding was clear. Trust had been reaffirmed, and a bond had been strengthened. The being's decision to help a single human years ago had not only saved a life, but had created a network of goodwill that now spanned systems and light years, proving that small acts of compassion could echo across time and space. That the fleets continued their journey home, and with every passing light year, a sense of reflection deepened. Humans discussed the implications of what had occurred. They spoke of responsibility, not as a burden, but as an honor. They spoke of preparedness, not just in technology, but in attitude and moral judgment. Every captain, every crew member, recognized that they were part of something larger than themselves. The original act of aid had sparked a chain reaction of courage, coordination, and empathy. Humanity had answered a call that was not mandatory but profoundly meaningful, and in doing so, had proven the enduring power of trust and goodwill. As the human captain reviewed the logs of the mission, they noted the quiet patterns that had guided success: attention to detail, willingness to communicate, rapid adaptation, and the capacity to act with both boldness and caution. These principles, born from necessity on a distant, dangerous planet, had scaled into a universal philosophy guiding interstellar response. Humanity had learned that preparation is not only about knowledge and tools, but also about mindset, understanding, and the capacity to respond with empathy when the unexpected arises. In private reflection, the human captain realized another truth. Acts of kindness, even when they seem small or unlikely to matter, can shape history in ways that no one can predict. The beings who had once aided a single human could not have imagined that their decision would inspire fleets of humans to coordinate a complex, life-saving mission across light years. Likewise, the humans who responded to the call could not have known exactly how their actions would influence future generations of explorers and leaders. Yet the ripple effect was undeniable. One moment of trust and courage had grown into a legacy that would shape interactions across the galaxy for years to come. Finally, as the ships neared their home systems, celebrations began, not loud or extravagant, but quiet and meaningful. Crews reflected on the success, shared stories, and recognized the courage and collaboration that had made the mission possible. There was a sense of connection, not just to each other, but to the beings they had saved and to the human who had once been helped years ago. The mission had transformed from a technical challenge into a story of unity, empathy, and the enduring impact of acting with courage and care. The human captain looked once more at the stars, remembering the distant world where they had first received help. They thought about the beings, the signal, the fleets, and every small choice that had made this mission successful. It was a reminder that life, no matter where it exists, is connected in ways humans cannot always see. And it was proof that when trust is met with trust, when courage is met with courage, the universe responds in kind. In the days that followed, humanity began documenting the mission and the lessons learned. These accounts were shared across fleets and systems, ensuring that future generations would understand the principles that had guided success. The story of one human saved long ago, of a call answered by fleets across light years, and of the bonds forged through empathy and action, became part of a growing body of knowledge. It was not just a story of survival. It was a story of humanity at its best prepared, courageous, and compassionate. And so, the saga concludes with a sense of enduring connection. The beings were safe. Humanity had demonstrated its courage and unity, and the memory of that first act of aid had grown into a lasting legacy. One life saved had inspired countless others, proving that even the smallest acts of trust and compassion can echo across time, shaping destinies in ways that no one can foresee. The story ends not with an ending, but with an open horizon, a universe full of possibilities, challenges, and the quiet knowledge that kindness, courage, and empathy can create bonds that last forever. The human captain, looking toward the next mission, understood something profoundly simple yet powerful. A universe remembers those who act with courage and compassion, and in return, those who are remembered will answer the call when it comes. And in that understanding lay the promise of hope, connection, and the enduring power of humanity's spirit.